So we're standing here in the shop with part of Grubbworm. There's the engine from last season.
Yeah.
And then the car's down at Rock Solid Motorsports right now. So what all's getting done to it?
So there's several things getting done to the car. I mean, primarily the main thing is the headers. We damaged the headers with, I guess, just a combination of heat and back pressure and everything else up at World Cup. You know, we're leaning on the car harder than we ever had. And we started developing some header gasket leaks that turned into some pretty nasty warped flanges. The hot side had dual slip joints in, which previously we found that really helped the headers to keep from warping, but up there they were actually going to come apart. So we had the more HP guys pitted next to us, and they kind of welded some stuff up just to keep it from blowing completely apart. But we pretty much trashed the whole turbo kit, so he's making a new kit, new headers. We're doing the headers with an adapter flange so that we can get a larger primary tube, and it spreads the bolt away from the primary tube. As you know, typical small block Chevy, the bolts are super close to the tube. So should be an improvement, hopefully in performance a little bit, but just more durability than anything. And did a new rear end. We installed a new Racecraft 9-inch housing here, and because of all the sheet metal work that's been done to the car previously, the wishbone like you buy from Racecraft that would be in, you know, prefab form probably wouldn't work. So Stephen and those guys are going to make a wishbone and kind of try to work around what's already been done to the car as much as possible. So doing a wishbone, of course, the cross member where the torque arm mounts has to all be redone because it's a shorter torque arm. So quite a bit.
Yeah, and so it's still technically a torque arm car, right?
Yeah, I mean, all this it's would be considered stock style suspension. It'll still have a torque arm. The torque arm, I think, roughly is going to be about 4 inches shorter than the torque arm we have been running. So that'll move our instant center a little further back in the car. Should help with, you know, traction being as we run a radial on radial prep surfaces. So it'll help us with the separation of the chassis, you know, as you launch, and should be a move in the right direction for that.
Okay, right on. And then talking about going up in performance, you're going from a 102 to a 106?
Yeah, so the Precision, we have Precision Pro Mod Turbo 102. It had a 105 millimeter turbine in it. So we've moved up to a 106 compressor with a 108 turbine. So basically the next step in progression of that line of turbo. Dimensionally it'll be all the same, so we'll be able to interchange. The idea is just to keep the 102 and we'll carry it for a backup in case we hurt the 106, because you know, you don't want to be in Texas racing a car and get knocked out because you have an issue with a turbo. So.
Yeah. Now you, was it last year or the season before that you ended up borrowing a turbo and you kind of found out some interesting stuff from changing different size turbos, right?
Yeah, we had a Pro Mod 88 on the car at the time. I guess it was the very beginning of the 2020 season, and had just put a Pro Mod 88 XPR on the car, which is like an X275 legal turbo. And we had an issue on the chassis dyno, and we thought that we had hurt the turbo. We actually had a huge backfire, and it all stemmed from, you know, having a crank sensor pickup issue, you know, and it lost its crank sync. It had a huge backfire, and it actually hurt the engine when that happened. But when we got everything back together, there was a lot of smoke coming from the exhaust, and you know, we determined or decided that it had hurt the turbo. You know, that huge backfire somehow had hurt it. So we borrowed a 98 from Eric, one of the guys that works at TKM. He loaned us his turbo, and we raced at Texas 2K with his turbo. And we had run, before the 88, we had an 8891, which is a smaller size turbo in general. And then when we went to the 88 XPR, we still kept the AR smaller. I think it was a 110 AR. So when we borrowed the 98, we were just days before Texas and kind of had to take what you could get kind of deal. And it was a 140 with a larger turbine in it as well. And we kind of thought it wouldn't work, or we were afraid it wouldn't spool good.
Yeah.
But it actually worked, just as good as the 88 did, or even the 8891 as far as making boost on the start line. So at that point we knew that, we could continue to step up our size and probably not hurt us. So we put the 88 back on it. We actually sent it to Precision because we thought we heard it. Mm-hmm. And we did. The turbo was fine. The whole reason it was, smoking and blowing oil and stuff is with the new engine, we were setting valve lash and doing other things. But basically at any time that we were spinning the engine over, but the ignition was not on, the scavenge pump for the oil return from the turbo wasn't being powered. So it was just backing up oil in the turbo. So it was just our own ignorance,
Oh, so it was just burning off.
Yeah, the turbo would just be, full of oil in the turbine housing where it was just being flooded. And then when we started the car up, of course it would blow oil out and it'd smoke, and it was just an error on our part. So
at that backfire, what did it end up doing? Did it end up cracking a head or something?
Well, it bent a connecting rod, and when we took it apart, it had also cracked the block, like they had been prone to doing.
So did you end up running that whole Texas event with a bent rod?
No, we fixed it. I mean, it was. Okay. We were probably a month prior to the event when we hurt the engine, when we thought we hurt the turbo. We got the engine. We scrambled around, got the engine fixed. Machined a new block. Put it in the car just days before the event, and then that's when we discovered all the smoking that was going on. Yeah. Thought we needed a turbo, so last minute we borrowed his, but technically didn't need it. But anyway, we put the 88 back on the car, ran for a little while, and then some of our competition had bumped their turbo size, and to kind of just follow suit with those guys, we went ahead and did the 102.
Well, it's a G-stroke at what cubic inch?
It has been a 329, which is, it's a 327 that's basically bored 10 over. Okay. This past season, we took it to 20 just because some of the blocks, core blocks we're finding are rusty, and, 10 didn't look like it would clean it up, so we did 20. So, I guess 330 cubic inch.
But you were thinking because of that cubic inch, going up to that bigger of a turbo wasn't going to work very well. That's why you were hesitant to even go to something bigger, right?
Yeah, well, we've been afraid of, going to a larger turbine and a larger AR housing. Yeah. Like now that we've got the 106 with a 108 millimeter turbine, its really only option is a 140. And, a couple of years ago, we wouldn't, we'd have never even tried that. Precision wouldn't have recommended that. We wouldn't have tried it, but because we borrowed Eric's turbo and it worked so well, then, we knew it would work. So. Yeah. Of course, we're doing a few other things maybe for this season. We'll maybe have a little more cubic inch at some point in time during the year. So the larger turbo, will be the better selection, and as we move in that direction, possibly away from the LT1, but we'll see.
Oh, okay. So building an LS for it, of course.
No.
Well, you're gonna do that thing where you end up now your turbo is a little bit better than your engine, and then you're gonna end up with an engine that might be a little bit better than the turbo, and doing that kind of thing.
Yeah. So we've had a bow tie block. It's a Gen 1 small block Chevy style block, but it's made as a one-piece rear main seal. Mm-hmm. I've had it for probably a year and a half. We toyed with the idea of running it last season, and a lot of people kind of were upset that we were going to move away from the LT1 and they didn't, it wouldn't be cool anymore. But we kind of achieved our 6-second goal.
Yeah, I was going to say, that was kind of you've kind of done everything you want to do with the LT, so you're not necessarily tied to it as much as you once were.
Right. I think we'll be running the LT to begin the season. Just because the other engine's not going to be ready with some of the delay on parts. Our cylinder heads primarily is probably what's going to delay that build, or the valves. But
So run me through what you want to talk about it. So it's when you say a bow tie block, so it's an aftermarket cast block?
it's an aftermarket cast iron block. It's considered their sportsman line of blocks.
Okay.
Like I mentioned, it's made in a fashion to accept a one-piece seal rear main. So literally all of my parts, other than pistons because the bore size will be increased, all of my parts, my crankshaft will interchange. So then my flywheels and clutches and everything will interchange. So it's as close to what I have in aftermarket form as I can get. And since we don't run a cooling system at all, our blocks are fully filled. Mm-hmm. We don't have water or a radiator or anything anyway. So at that point, what really defines the LT1 is the reverse flow cooling. I mean, they have an Opti and they have all these things that people, beat them up over, I guess. But the primary difference between the LT1 and the Gen 1 small block Chevy is the cooling system. And since we don't run a cooling system, that's, irrelevant. So our cylinder heads, intake, everything will bolt to this Gen 1 block. The only thing that would be different is just the timing cover and the motor plate. So we'll eventually, sometime during the season, we'll put that engine in it. But for Texas 2K, we'll still be LT1, and hopefully we can go deeper into the 6s before we do swap it.
Right on. And so I didn't know that. So you plan on running the same heads that you ran pretty much last season?
Yeah. So that's the engine that came out of it. The cylinder heads are down rock solid on a mock-up block right now for the new header fabrication. But we're literally going to take that thing apart, just inspect it, clean it up, probably put some new rings and bearings in it. Not even sure we'll do that. If it looks good, we might just put it back together, because I'd say it has probably between 35 and 40 passes on it from last season. We just didn't race quite as much as we normally would have, and didn't have quite as good of luck as we had seemed to have been having, so we didn't make a huge number of passes. So we'll pretty much just freshen it up and put it back in the car. The small block, Gen 1 block that we're talking about building, I have a set of heads that match that engine's heads, but they go from a 233cc to a 245. So it'll be the same basic head casting as far as header fitment, intake, all that stuff should bolt right to it. So the idea is to be able to take, depending on what the event is, or what time of year it is, or even just whatever, we'll be able to swap between the Gen 1 aftermarket block engine and the LT stock block. We'll have two different motor plates, basically two completely assembled different engines. So the LT will become a backup, I guess you'd say.
Right on. Okay. So hopefully no engine swaps in the pits, but that's possible.
Yeah, I mean, you go to, like I said, Maryland, Texas, FL2K, you go to these bigger events where you got 3 or 4 days at the event. I mean, if you got a backup engine, you should take it. Most of the import guys have backup engines. I mean, we're not going to go into the reasons why they need those, but if you've traveled to those huge events and you've got all this time, take a backup engine, and
all right,
you can lean on it a little harder than maybe you would otherwise, knowing that you're still going to be able to probably race.
And so, what did you say the bore and stroke for that new motor, and what you think of the cubic inch?
Well, we'll keep the stroke the same. It'll still be a 3 1/4 inch stroke, but it'll be a 4-130 bore. It's a 4-125 bore as it would come, as you buy the block.
And what's the LT bore?
It's a 4020.
Okay.
So we'll be going up 110 thousandths on bore. Okay. So just with the bore size change only, the cubic inch will go from a 330-ish to like a 348.
Cool.
So we'll gain 18 cubic inches.
And still anticipating the same type of RPM?
Yeah, probably going to try to turn it a little more.
Is it solid? Well, how much RPM out of it? Is it solid?
Yeah, it'll be a solid cam. We've got a new cam coming, or it's been spec'd. Comp does our cams for our LT, or small block Chevy stuff. Martin Smallwood spec'd it. He spec'd the cam we've been running. and he's spec'd a new cam for this new build, which is real similar. It's just a little more duration on both sides. So, you know, the idea is to turn it to, you know, 9,400, maybe 95 if we need to. And I mean, just turning it more RPM helps us, you know, with our gearing. We're going to do some stuff and try to do some 8th mile stuff this year. So we may do some second gear leave, you know, deep rear gear type stuff too. And to be able to turn it more RPM will kind of broaden the window of what we can do, you know, because if you gear it too high, you know, if you gear the rear end too numerically low, then we might not have enough start line ratio to make the car leave good. So we might be hurting clutches and parts, but it's all an experiment. But
so you're thinking about launching this year in second. You'll be playing around with that, is what you're saying?
Yes. A couple other guys have talked about doing that, and we've thought about doing that forever. And you know, with the T56, you're pretty limited on your gear ratios.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, you can have a gear set made by PPG. We're still running G-force stuff in our car at the moment, but PPG can do gear ratios that are custom if you buy, you know, multiple sets. But like if you look at the automatic transmission guys that run 8th mile only, so, and we're trying to go to South Georgia in February is kind of like a test session for Texas is what's really going down to, because we're not going to be competitive in the type of class we have to enter with our turbo size and, you know, everything that's makes our car what it is. We'll have to run limited drag radial. So the limited drag radial guys, I mean, they're running 390s in the 8th mile now, the fastest. In October, it looked like to make the field, you know, a 32 car field, to even make the field, the 32nd place car, I think, ran a 4:45. So the fastest we've ever been is a 4:57.
Wow.
So we're going to try some gear and stuff with the 8th mile deal. Of course, we're improving the car in a lot of ways with the new rear end and the anti-roll bar, you know, that we have upgraded, a huge upgrade. So we're hoping we can go down there and just make the field. If we run a high 430 and make the field, you know, I'll be tickled to death with that, and that would technically be the fastest H pattern car to the 8th at that point.
Right on. Okay.
So that's the goal, you know, for that.
Yeah.
And test gears. You know, we're going to take a couple of chunks and do some experimenting with a second gear launch.
Cool. Right on. My dad has actually been bugging me about the same exact thing. To tell him to try that. Tell him to try that, because that's what they would do at like motocross launches and stuff. He always tells me about pulling up to the line and watching the guys beside him click up in the gear, and he goes, "What the hell?" And they would launch so much better than him trying to struggle, you know, to find traction at first, then grab second.
So like second gear, you know, the second gear ratio in our transmission or any 266 geared T56 is a 178.
Okay.
And a lot of automatic guys, you know, would, for the quarter mile, like if you had a power glide, depending on your power level, of course, but if you had a power glide, a common gear ratio for first is a 180. So we're basically, you know, that exact ratio just in second gear. And of course, we would have an in-between gear of our 1-to-1, you know, from compared to a power glide, it would have a 180 and a 1-to-1. So we've got a 178, a 130, and a 1-to-1. So technically, it could become a huge advantage. It's just we have to, you know, make our clutch live with that, you know.
And you're saying it would be a huge advantage because you have one extra gear in between, as compared to a power glide doesn't have that.
Yeah, so
you go straight from a 180 to a 1-to-1.
Yeah, they would go from a 180 first to a 1-to-1 high.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's two speed. But
and so then you would only be shifting twice in an 8th, right? You'd still be in 4th, crossing the lights,
Yeah, so like now when we run the 8th mile, if we don't change our gear from our quarter mile setup, we would just finish the 8th mile in 3rd gear. So we're still only shifting twice. But
well, no, you'd only be shifting once.
First to second and then second to third. So
but if you left in second, would you still?
we'd
finish
be
third?
going into fourth then. So we'd be
Okay.
doing the same number of shifts, but the idea is you're lowering the start line gear ratio, so the car hopefully will be able to leave with more power and, go faster.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have to make that first shift near as quick, in other words.
So when you're running the 8th mile, when are you shifting from first to second? I mean, are you doing that before the 60 foot?
I really don't know the answer to that question, but it would run.
I mean, is it pretty quick? Is that the first thing in your mind when the light hits green is grabbing second?
Yeah, I mean, it comes quick. I would say the car's running probably 80 mile per hour when it would shift from first to second.
Okay.
With the gear, the 8th mile gear stuff that we're talking about, it would be running around 100 mile an hour before we'd go from second to third, which would be our first shift. We just started in second. But, a lot of automatic guys have gotten into the exotic 3-speed transmission builds, and they're having a close ratio turbo 400 or something built, for example, which might have a 169 first and then a gear in between and then the 1-to-1. Especially blower guys and guys like that would be sensitive to RPM drop and their power range. Turbo is going to make torque and it's going to make the same boost everywhere. But like a blower guy, they put a lot of effort or a lot of thought into gearing from RPM drop standpoint. And our manual, it does the same thing. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out, to see if we can make the clutch live.
Okay, right on. Any other major improvements besides all of that?
We're doing a lot of little stuff to the car. I mean, I've learned a lot last season by helping Joel Steele. Some of the things that had been implemented on his car. I mean, my car was basically, or has always been basically, simple. Everything the way I do it. The less involved it is, the easier it seems to be to maintain. And like I don't have traction control on the car. I don't have wheelie control on the car. I don't have ride height sensors. There's a ton of data that I haven't had. The car works good, and I kind of always have the mentality of, if I'm running up front, if I'm qualifying number one, if I'm winning races, I'm not going to really push the envelope. I'm going to go to races and, run a setup that I know is going to run this ET and be competitive, and I know my parts are going to live. Mm-hmm. And, I've kind of just tried to race smart, in that regard. But now there's guys that are, are getting a good bit faster than us. Joel Steele being number one. And of course, he's building a new car that we all know is going to go even way more fast than what he has done. So we're going to put a few more things on the car to electronics to, give us some more data and hopefully help us push, a little harder, try to get more aggressive on our 60-foot times. And that's where we're going to make up a huge amount of ET is in the front half of the track. So we'll do a ride height sensor and a few things like that, and then we're going to upgrade our ignition. Not that I'm sure we need to, but we've been running the Holley Smart Coils, and of course we run methanol, so there's a pretty huge demand on the ignition system just to be able to light the ignition. So we're going to upgrade to a MSD Pro 600. It's a capacitive discharge type ignition system, and that means changing to the coils that go along with that kit. So we're going to do that. Some of the guys I've talked to that have tried it, they seem to gain a good bit of power while still keeping the AFR extremely rich, which is what we do. We keep it extremely rich to be safe. The balance of the cylinders is obviously not going to be perfect, but if you're extremely to the rich side of where things are going to be happy, you're just this hole over here might be exactly where it needs to be, and this hole is going to be rich. We don't want to get on the other side of that and start hurting engine parts. So
Sure.
to keep it super rich, the stronger ignition will hopefully make some performance gains. So.
Right on. Yeah, I've even heard good things about that ignition system too, or at least some of the marketing around it has been pretty good.
Yeah, so, and we've got nitrous on the car now that we haven't used yet, so that's going to put that much more of a strain on the ignition. So.
Yeah. And you're still using the Dominator ECU?
Yeah.
How will the pickup be? How will the crank and sensors work on the small block?
Well, it'll all be the same. Currently, I have a flying magnet crank trigger. We ran the 24X forever, and it worked great right up to the point we changed. Basically, we changed to the flying magnet, the 4X pulse per fire crank trigger, and we changed to that because we thought we were having some electrical interference. Data logs do some weird things sometimes, and we had already ran against an RPM limiting deal, just like I told you about when we hurt that engine on the dyno. It was a crank trigger issue, and we had kind of remedied that by running a resistor style spark plug all along. And there's really not many resistor style spark plugs in the heat range that we need. If we were running an LS, there would be none. But with it being a small block Chevy, you can run those old school, like 13/16 hex plugs that fit within the cylinder head. So we've been running those, and that cured our issue. But we went to the 4-magnet deal to see if we could run a non-resistor plug, because I think there may be some difference in spark energy that we're giving up with the resistor plug. Mm-hmm. But we never even really got to the point of testing that. So we made an upgrade there that may or may not have been necessary. But either way, we have that now. And then the cam sensor, the cam position is done through the EFI connection kit. It actually runs an LS2 cam sensor in a billet timing cover. And small block that we've got going together is going to use their same timing cover as what I have. It's just made to fit a small block Chevy. Okay. So everything will be plug and play, same exact deal, just the cover's machined a little different for the bolt pattern.
Right on. Run me through the schedule.
So the first race we're going to is Lights Out, South Georgia. It's late February, like maybe something like 24th through the 27th, I think. Then it'll be Texas 2K a couple of weeks after that. Probably going to try to do some of the streetcar takeover events again this year, at least the ones close to us. So probably Charlotte, VMP maybe.
Okay. Bristol.
Bristol for sure, probably Bristol. The MITM event this year, I think they've moved it to Texas, to Dallas maybe. It's in May, I think. So
is that the one with the big purse?
Yeah, they had a $10,000 payout last year. Last year was the first year they had that event.
Invite only?
Yeah, it was an invite only. They had 2 different stick shift classes. So they had the Elite, I guess, which was technically the invite only. And then they had the street, or whatever they called it, which was like a 32 car field for everybody that wasn't in the Elite class.
All right, well, cool. Well, we won't keep you anymore, and we'll get to work, and we'll run over to Rock Solid and get some footage of the car being back together. Do you know when Steven's supposed to have the car back to you?
I don't have an exact timeline. I imagine it'll be a couple more weeks.
So. Right on. Awesome. Well, thanks. So if you guys want to keep up with what's going on with Grubbworm, we'll have content and results and whatnot from every race. We'll try to do some more recaps after every race coming up, so check out tickperformance.com. At the bottom side of the main page of the website is our blog, and so happening now. So you see a lot of the footage from Joel Steele's, any of the records from last year, all that stuff is posted there. So check it out there, and then check out our social channels. Again, it's Tick Performance, TICK, and thank you guys for watching.